The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. Heavy stock, gold-embossed lettering, sealed like a royal decree. It sat on the kitchen counter next to a half-finished smoothie and a stack of unpaid bills Marissa never bothered to open. For a second, I just stared at it, then tore the seal, already knowing what was inside. A wedding invitation. Her brother Logan's name shimmered on the card, intertwined with that of some debutante named Celeste Preston. No footnote was needed to understand. The Prestons were old money, the kind of wealth where museums, not just buildings, had wings named after them. The kind that made people like Marissa hum with ambition and sharpen their smiles. She walked in just as I was reading, holding up 2 swatches of fabric like they held the secrets of the universe. "Try to look presentable for once," she tossed off casually, already flipping through a designer catalog spread out on the kitchen island. "Logan's marrying into society's creme de la creme. It'll be huge." Of course, it would be huge. Everything with them always was. The dinners, the charity galas, the family gatherings, opulent public spectacles designed to make them feel important, and me feel like furniture. She hadn't asked if I wanted to go. She didn't need to. It was never a discussion. We went. She caught the hitch in my breath, the lingering way my gaze held on to the card. "Don't even start," she added, not looking up. "It's just a weekend, one weekend. Smile, show up, and don't embarrass me." The last phrase landed like a slap. She didn't even register the impact. It wasn't the first time I'd wanted to remind her that I had been showing up for 10 years. To family events, to holidays where I was treated like a temporary plug for an empty space, to dinners where I was the punchline at the far end of the table, laughed at for daring to drop out of law school to chase some phantom startup. They didn't know who I really was. Not the Prestons, not Logan, not even Marissa anymore. Somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten or simply stopped caring to remember. I could have reminded her. I could have told her that phantom startup was now Atlas Industries, that while she and her family sipped champagne and gossiped about me, I was pulling 15-hour days behind closed doors, slowly building one of the most influential tech firms in the country. That I deliberately kept my name out of the official documents, the press releases, the radar, because I didn't need applause. I needed leverage, but I said none of it. I just carefully folded the invitation and slipped it back into the envelope. "Of course," I replied calmly. "I'll be ready." She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her catalog. She never asked what I meant by ready. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt like rehearsals for a play I had no lines in. Marissa met with planners and stylists, gushed over the estate's vineyard, and debated Celeste's designer choices. She treated it like a royal coronation. Logan was climbing the social ladder, and the entire family, especially her, was hitching a ride. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with her mother, laughing. "He'll look presentable. I picked out the suit myself. Nothing flashy, just enough to blend in. I don't want the Prestons asking where I found him like I dragged him off a Craigslist ad." I stood in the hallway, out of sight, just listening. I didn't confront her, didn't interrupt. Instead, later that night I sat in my office, opened my laptop, and finalized the last steps of a business deal I'd been orchestrating for over 6 months. A deal that had begun with the acquisition of a small but critical supplier that serviced exactly one client, Preston Tech, Logan's company. I'd watched them slowly become dependent, contract by quiet contract, until they were practically eating out of our hands. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about timing. And this wedding, this spectacle, was the perfect stage. I wasn't just attending Logan's wedding. I was walking into the lion's den with a quiet smile and a secret they weren't prepared for. I chose my own suit, custom-tailored, charcoal gray, fine wool. Minimalist, sharp, but understated. No designer logos, no ostentatious displays of wealth, just precision tailoring. Because unlike the Prestons, I didn't need labels to define my worth. I was the label. The day before we left, Marissa kissed me on the cheek and handed me a small gift box. "For the weekend," she said. Inside was a gold tie clip with my initials engraved in a font I didn't like. "Thanks," I said. "Don't forget to smile," she replied. "Photographers everywhere. And remember, you're a guest. Let Logan shine. It's his weekend, right?" The next morning, we boarded a private shuttle headed for the estate. Acres of manicured lawns, ivy-choked facades, fountains that looked like they'd arrived with Roman permits. It was a kingdom built for people who believed they were born to be applauded. Marissa couldn't stop smiling. "Isn't it like a dream?" I looked out the window. Something like that. But I wasn't asleep. I was wide awake. And this time, I wasn't just tolerating her family. I was about to reintroduce myself. Quietly, thoroughly, permanently. 10 years ago, I stood on the periphery of Marissa's family dinners, nursing a glass of cheap wine and the heavy silence while Logan landed another jab at my expense. "So, let me get this straight," he'd said, leaning back in his chair loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You quit law to build apps? What's your company called again?" Hope and Hunger. The room had laughed, not politely, not nervously. A booming, self-satisfied laughter that seemed designed to hit me from all sides. Even Marissa had chuckled. She'd patted me on the back like a loyal golden retriever. Loyal, but pathetic. "He's ambitious," she'd said. Her voice was the only soft sound in the room. "He believes in what he's building." That was 10 years ago. I hadn't forgotten a single second. They didn't know I was building Atlas Industries on a 2-year-old laptop, fueled by instant coffee from a supermarket, working out of a cramped apartment with a wall thin enough to hear the neighbor's dog yelp in the night like it was being electrocuted. Friends stopped calling. Investors dismissed me like I had a contagious disease. I missed dinners, I missed sleep, I missed birthdays. But every rejection taught me where not to knock. Every failure burned away the excess noise. Marissa had been supportive at first, sort of, but she always compared me to Logan and his promotions at Preston Tech, to her cousin Drew getting his MBA. "Maybe you should network more," she'd said once, folding laundry. "Like Logan. He's always at conferences." As if a handshake equated to building something from nothing. What she didn't know, never asked, was that I wasn't networking because I was working. Because I was coding, hiring, firing, taking calls from overseas suppliers at 3 a.m. and learning to negotiate without blinking. I needed help structuring the company without drawing attention. That's when I called Uncle Cyrus. A retired civil engineer, shrewd enough and gray-haired enough for banks and boardrooms to take seriously. He'd agreed to be the front man only if I promised to keep my name out of it. "If people know who really owns this thing," he'd warned, "they'll eat you alive before your first real quarter." So I'd stayed in the shadows while Marissa's family fawned over Logan's LinkedIn updates. I'd laid Atlas's foundation in silence. I'd watched Marissa gravitate more and more towards the shiny things, her mother's pearls, her father's political fundraisers, Logan's golf club events. She'd ask if I wanted to go. I'd say no. Not because I was antisocial, but because I knew I wasn't ready yet. She started introducing me as just the tech guy. It had evolved from my husband who's building something, to just my husband, to, oh, he works with computers. As if the grease under my fingernails came from a keyboard. And still, I waited. I watched Logan climb the ladder at Preston Tech like a man on a trampoline, bouncing higher and higher on the strength of his last name and who he had dinner with. His success wasn't built. It was inherited and polished. He kissed rings, I chewed glass. One evening, I remember it too clearly, our anniversary, Marissa had booked us a table at a trendy rooftop restaurant downtown. Expensive, pretentious, and perfect for Instagram. Mid-meal, she'd dropped her fork and said, "Sometimes I think I married the wrong brother." It was a joke, I think. But the fork hadn't fallen on its own, and her laughter hadn't reached her eyes. I told her, "I'm not trying to be Logan. I'm trying to be something else." She'd waved a dismissive hand. "Different. doesn't get written into wills. And that's when I knew she didn't see me, the real me. She saw a placeholder, a man with dreams, but without the kind of wealth her family could proudly discuss over brunch. I said nothing that night, just finished my wine and watched the city lights. But I didn't forget. I never forget. Over the years, as Atlas grew, I made sure every decision added weight to a structure no one saw. I diversified shell companies, forged partnerships with firms even Logan's company depended on. I watched him preen in headlines, never realizing how deep my roots were growing beneath the ground he danced on. Marissa didn't notice the shift. She thought I was stable, maybe a little boring. She liked it when I was quiet, playing the supportive husband at family dinners, letting Logan dominate the room. I didn't mind. Let them think I was a joke. Let them sip their wine and whisper behind cupped hands. I was a ghost in my own marriage, yes. But ghosts have their own kind of power. They haunt, they observe, and they wait. By the time Logan's engagement to Celeste Preston was announced, I was already moving pieces on the board. Preston Tech's supply chain was a fragile ecosystem. Atlas, operating through SP Capital and 2 other intermediary firms, had begun quietly, legally, ruthlessly, buying up the smaller suppliers they depended on. It had taken 6 months. Not a single headline. When the gold-embossed wedding invitation arrived, I knew what it really was. Not a celebration, but a summons. The joke was over. The nice guy with the dreams had built himself a throne in the dark. Now it was time to bring it into the light. The morning of the wedding, she was draped in pastel silk and arrogance. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the cuffs of my charcoal gray suit. The same one Marissa had said was too understated for a wedding of this caliber. She'd wanted me in something louder, something shiny enough to pass family inspection. But I wasn't dressing for their approval. I was dressing for control. Marissa swept into the room in a designer dress that probably cost more than our first car. Her hair was sculpted. Her earrings glittered like they belonged in a museum display case. She didn't so much look at me as glide past. "Try not to slouch," she said, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on my lapel. "There will be photographers." I offered a smile I didn't feel and followed her out the door. The Preston estate looked like outtakes from a political dynasty's campaign reel. Sprawling vineyards, ivy-covered facades, fountains that danced on a schedule, valets in matching livery. We were ferried up the winding driveway in a black SUV, but the moment we stepped out, I seemed to become invisible. Marissa instantly blended in. Her stride matched the gravel paths, her laughter the chamber music drifting through the air. She belonged here, or at least she thought she did. I was the appendage, the footnote, the prop. The guests looked like a walking stock portfolio. Senators, CEOs, a few washed-up actors from daytime soaps. All expensive, bored, and sober enough to make meaningful connections. They greeted Marissa with air kisses and compliments. I was barely acknowledged. When I was, it was with the vague, dismissive curiosity reserved for a third husband. I scanned the estate, noting the details most would miss. The security was visible but discreet. The catering staff wore branded pins on their lapels. The photographers moved like shadows, capturing carefully curated moments. And somewhere beyond the marble columns and glass walls, the Preston family waited. When we entered the reception hall, Marissa was instantly swept away by her mother and 2 aunts, like a debutante at her final presentation. No goodbye, no glance back. I was left adrift. My name wasn't on the immediate family list. Instead, I was redirected by a flustered attendant who sized me up with a quick glance from head to toe and then pointed towards the 3rd row. The 3rd row. Not with Marissa, not with Logan and the wedding party, not even with her cousins and distant relatives. I was seated behind a hedge fund manager's wife and across from a man who spent 20 minutes on his phone arranging a private jet for his dog. I took my seat in silence. I wasn't here for the flowers or the vows. I didn't need a front row seat. I was here for the reckoning. Logan made his entrance to a ripple of applause and strained admiration. He looked exactly as I remembered, smug, polished, and hollow. His tuxedo was bespoke, his smile blinding, and his confidence radiated from a man who had never truly earned anything. When our eyes met, he looked right through me with the same casual disregard he'd had 10 years ago, when he joked about me being a professional dreamer. The bride, Celeste Preston, was everything I expected: elegant, cold, born into a world where affection was as transactional as a corporate merger. She clung to Logan like she already regretted signing the contract. Her family watched the ceremony with proud, empty smiles. As the service began, I stopped listening to the officiant's voice. Instead, I watched Marissa. She sat in the front row, shoulders squared, smile fixed. She glanced back once, her eyes flickered over me, uncertain, waiting. She had no idea. The vows were exchanged, the applause boomed like cannon fire. Drones buzzed overhead, capturing the moment. Photographers swarmed the aisle like paparazzi chasing a scandal. Champagne was being poured before the couple even kissed. At the reception, I glided through the crowd like a ghost. Marissa laughed with Logan's friends, never once introducing me. Her father offered a perfunctory nod that acknowledged presence, not personhood. I found a quiet spot by a marble pillar and watched it all unfold. The power plays, the alliances, the whispered deals exchanged between sips of flutes. And still, they didn't know who I was. They knew me as Marissa's husband, the quiet one, the one too insignificant to matter, the one who had once been the punchline at the dinner table. But that was about to change. I checked my watch, then my phone. A text from Cyrus blinked on the screen. "All set. Your call when ready." I didn't hit send. Not yet. Timing was everything. Logan walked past me, laughing with two men in custom suits. He didn't even register my presence, like I was part of the catering staff. Maybe the IT guy who'd come to fix the Wi-Fi. Good. Let them underestimate me. It was exactly what I was counting on. The DJ shifted the tempo to something slower. Couples drifted onto the dance floor. The Preston patriarch gave a short speech about legacy and tradition. Logan followed with one about innovation and building a new future together. I sipped my drink and listened intently. Every word was a mirror, empty, reflecting, meaning nothing beneath the veneer. When the applause died down, Logan raised his glass. "To new beginnings," I smiled. Oh yes, new beginnings. But they weren't his. They were mine. And tomorrow, the masks would fall. I should have known not to bother looking for a place card. The reception was sprawling, a two-tiered affair across the Preston estate. The ballroom upstairs, all gilded trim and vineyard views, and a shaded garden area below, presumably for the overflow guests. They'd presented it elegantly, but it wasn't. It was a polite way of saying, "You're not one of us." I scanned the tables in the main hall, ignoring the trickle of guests who clearly didn't recognize me. That was the theme of the day, blending in with the expensive furniture. I checked each card, row by row, expecting at least a courtesy seat with Marissa's distant cousins. Nothing. I searched again, slower. Still nothing. "Looking for your seat?" Logan's voice was a rusty knife, familiar and serrated. He stood beside me, holding a champagne flute, slightly too relaxed, like he owned the oxygen in the room. The smirk on his face hadn't changed since the night he'd called me a failed dreamer. "There's a table out back," he added, nodding his chin towards the lower level, "where the riffraff eats." A few of his friends chuckled behind him. Not loud, not boisterous, but sharp, private, the kind of laughter that wounds without leaving a visible scar. Logan didn't laugh. He didn't need to. His smile did all the work. I stood still, looking at the man who used to laugh while I poured myself instant coffee at family gatherings. The man who'd mocked my beat-up laptop, who'd told Marissa I was building castles in the air, the kind that didn't pay rent. My wife hadn't stopped him. She was across the ballroom holding a glass, talking to her cousin, laughing at something I knew was at my expense. She glanced at me, noticed Logan's smirk, and then offered one of her own. In that moment, something final clicked into place. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, pulled out my phone, and stepped 3 paces away from the crowd. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, not with hesitation, but with intent. Timing was everything. I pressed the contact. Cyrus answered on the second ring. "It's done," I said. No need for elaboration. "Good. I'm pulling the plug now." I hung up. No threats, no warnings, no theatrics. Just a single sentence that would unravel their world. Logan's laughter faltered. He took a step closer. "Who the hell were you just talking to?" I turned my phone towards him. The Atlas Industries logo glowed on the screen, a beacon in the storm. I watched his expression shift. Confusion, realization, then dawning horror. "The $50 million semiconductor contract," I said calmly. "The one keeping Preston Tech afloat. It's gone." "What?" he roared. "You can't." "I just did." His fingers tightened around his glass, his jaw twitching. "You're not even in semiconductors." "No," I said. "I own the company that owns the company that supplies the components you depend on." It took him a few seconds to piece it together. I could almost hear the gears grinding. The failed supplier bids they'd been trying to replace for the last 6 months. The strange delays. The sudden price hikes. The unknown holding company, SP Capital, that had appeared out of nowhere. The shell corporations. The quiet acquisitions. All roads led to Atlas, and all of Atlas led to me. Marissa was walking towards me, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown. "What's going on?" she asked, but her eyes were already glued to my phone screen. I saw the exact moment it clicked for her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She paled. This was the Marissa who'd told me to smile for the photographers. The Marissa who introduced me as just the tech guy. The woman who'd once said she envied Celeste for marrying a man with purpose. She'd married one too. She'd just never bothered to look closely. "You..." Logan's voice was a strangled whisper. "You're behind Atlas?" I nodded. He stared at me like I'd broken an unspoken agreement they'd all signed. In his world, I was supposed to be harmless background noise, the guy who held Marissa's coat and paid for parking. But now the joke had a face, and it wasn't laughing. "I told you," I said to Marissa. "I didn't need the spotlight. I just needed the right time." Panic rippled through the room like a wave. Phones were being pulled out. Someone whispered, "Is that the guy from Atlas?" A woman clutched her husband's arm. Waiters froze mid-pour. The string quartet faltered. I turned towards the very overflow area Logan had mocked and located my place card. Table 19. Catering staff. I picked it up, examining the elegant calligraphy like a relic, then slipped it into my pocket. Logan was still rooted to the spot. Marissa stood beside him, her lips moving silently. I cast one last glance at them, the golden boy with no spine and the woman who mistook silence for weakness, and headed back towards the garden. I wasn't just attending the wedding anymore. I was rewriting the guest list. And this time, I didn't need an invitation. Power. That's what it was always about. It doesn't always wear a crown or shout from a balcony. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in a gray suit and a calm voice, pressing one button while everyone else is still sipping champagne. Logan lunged after me, his footsteps frantic on the marble as I stepped onto the stone path leading down to the garden. His champagne flute was still in his hand, but he no longer held it like a prop. His fingers were white-knuckled around the stem, as if it was the only thing tethering him to reality. "What deal?" he demanded, his voice cracking with desperation. "What are you talking about?" I turned to face him. The reception lights behind him cast a halo around his bewildered face. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The semiconductor contract, I said evenly. The one your father-in-law lobbied for. The one that was supposed to be a major win this quarter. Atlas Industries owns that contract. He blinked. The words didn't seem to compute. And I continued, own Atlas. For a long moment, Logan just stood there, as if trying to understand a foreign language spoken in his own home. He finally stammered. You're not supposed to be the punchline, I finished for him. The loser with the laptop. Behind him, a few guests had stopped. They lingered at the entrance, pretending to admire the garden lanterns, but I saw the way their ears twitched, the way phones were being pulled out, the way the whispers were spreading like wildfire. You're lying, Logan said, but the edge was gone from his voice. It was just a tremor now. I kept my name out of it. Uncle Cyrus was the face while I built the backbone. You remember him, right? The quiet guy who never said anything at dinner? You all thought he was a harmless retiree. He took a step back. The gears in his head were finally turning. I could see it. Every failed negotiation in the last 6 months. Every delay from their supposedly reliable suppliers. Every merger they couldn't block because it came from names that meant nothing to them. The entire chessboard had been rearranged behind his back. You sabotaged us. No, I corrected him. I outmaneuvered you. You built your career on inherited connections and family handshakes. I built mine on data, persistence, and the ability to move unseen. More guests were filtering into the garden. I saw Celeste's father, Richard Preston, standing rigid by the grapevines, his jaw tight. The Prestons didn't like surprises, especially public ones, especially ones that cost them money. Marissa appeared beside Logan. Her face was pale, her lips pressed so tightly they almost disappeared. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm answering the question you never thought to ask," I said. "Who I really am." Marissa shook her head, as if the motion could rewind the nightmare. "Not now, not here." "No," I said. "This is exactly the time and the place." Logan lunged forward, the anger returning in a second wave. "You think this makes you king? You're ruining a wedding, making a scene." "This isn't a scene, Logan. This is business, real business. The kind you read about in Forbes, the kind you never truly understood. Your company runs on chips supplied by contracts you no longer have. Your quarterly earnings are about to plummet. The investors will be calling tomorrow, then your board, then your father-in-law." He swayed. Actually swayed. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. A ripple of commotion started near the dance floor. Someone had shown one of the groomsmen an urgent news alert on their phone. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. Something along the lines of, Atlas Industries CEO revealed as secret power broker at Preston wedding. $50 million deal terminated mid-ceremony. I didn't need a press release. The truth was already going viral. Her father followed me back into the ballroom, his voice strained but trying to maintain an even keel. "You've blindsided us," he said. "No," I replied. I walked in through the front door. "You just never bothered to check who held the keys. Do you have any idea how this will look? Like the truth." Marissa found me at the edge of the room, where the bar met the hallway. She was breathless, still in her heels, her lipstick slightly smudged. Her entire demeanor had shifted. The detached queen of the morning was gone, replaced by a woman desperately clinging to the remnants of control. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed. I sipped my drink and looked down at her, the mask finally gone. Her eyes darted around, trying to gauge who was listening. "Do you even realize what you've done, Marissa?" I asked softly. "Look around." And she did. The carefully constructed facade around us was cracking. Her father stood in a corner, jaw clenched, speaking furiously into his phone. Logan's best man had vanished. Celeste looked like she'd just been informed her yacht had been repossessed. Even the catering staff seemed more on edge, as if they could feel the tectonic shift beneath the soles of their shoes. I didn't need a microphone. I didn't need a stage. The truth had its own amplification. Marissa grabbed my wrist, pulling me towards the hallway that led to the restrooms. "I don't understand," she said, her voice wavering. "Why now? Why would you—" I looked at her, and for a long moment, I didn't see the woman I'd married. I saw the polished socialite her family had sculpted out of stone, the one who'd remade herself for a world that wasn't mine and tried to drag me along like a pet. The one who'd stopped saying "we" and started saying Logan would— "Don't you really understand?" I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was searching for a script that no longer applied. "I've been listening for years," I said. "To being talked over, to my name being forgotten. You stood beside them while they did it." "I was protecting you," she snapped. "You laughed when they made jokes," I said. "You dressed me to blend in. You never once asked if I liked being invisible." Her eyes dropped. Shame or anger? I couldn't tell anymore. Maybe both. "You could have told me," she said. "I did," I replied quietly. "You just weren't listening." The hallway door swung open, and her father strode in, red-faced and sweating, followed by a man I recognized as his lawyer. The elderly Langford James was a man who rarely looked flustered. Today, he looked like he'd seen smoke in his vault. "We need to talk, now," he said. I looked at Marissa. "Do you want to stay?" She blinked. "I'm done pretending," I said. "But you're free to choose who you are." I walked past them both and back into the ballroom. That's when the music stopped. The DJ, clearly instructed by some frantic manager or relative, cut the playlist mid-song. A wave of awkwardness washed over the room as guests started checking their phones. The headline was already hitting the news feeds. I bet it had started as a whisper and then escalated into a siren's wail. "CEO revealed as secret owner of Atlas Industries at Preston wedding. $50 million deal terminated mid-ceremony." I didn't need a press release. The truth had already gone viral. Her father followed me back into the ballroom, trying to keep his tone even. "You've caught us off guard," he said. "No," I replied. "I walked in through the front door. You just never bothered to check who held the keys. Do you understand how this will look? Like the truth." I turned to face him. "You all thought power was the one wearing the bespoke tuxedo and smiling for the cameras. But power is the person you don't see. The one sitting in the third row, the one your son laughs at, the one your daughter barely acknowledges, the one who listens." His jaw twitched. "There's still time to fix this." I handed him my business card. "That's my office number. If your board wants to talk, they can call on Monday. But you should know every hour this situation gets more expensive." The card burned in his hand like it weighed a ton. Security was summoned again, but this time they hesitated. I saw one of the guards check his phone, glance at me, then slowly back away. He knew. They all knew. The bride and groom emerged from a side room. Celeste's face was pale and drawn, her eyes shooting daggers at Logan, who now looked less like a groom and more like a man who'd woken up in a burning house. Logan's steps were slow, uncertain. He met my gaze across the room. This time, no words were needed. Just a long, bitter look from a man who finally saw the shadow that had been growing behind him for years. I didn't flinch. I stood in the middle of that ballroom and watched their empire begin to tremble. The decorations, the guests, the polite lies, they were all unraveling thread by thread. And I hadn't lifted a finger. Because real power doesn't roar. It arrives quietly and waits for the silence. The first headline hit before the wedding cake was even cut. I saw a woman in pearls gasp, staring at her phone, show it to her husband, then tuck it into her clutch like it might detonate. A ripple spread through the ballroom in real time. Phones lit up, conversations shifted from polite chatter to hushed murmurs. By the time Logan and Celeste returned from their awkward vineyard photo shoot, the world knew CEO crashes wedding with $50 million bombshell. Preston Tech on the brink as Secret Atlas Industries owner pulls the plug. Quiet billionaire hiding in plain sight. Everyone had their angle, but they all told the same story. The man no one noticed had just pulled the rug out from under an entire legacy, and he hadn't even raised his voice. I didn't wait for the final toasts. I left quietly. No grand exit, no parting words. I walked out the front door while most of the guests were still reeling, their whispers echoing like gossip at a wake. A few looked at me, a couple nodded, one or two offered a discreet thumbs up, like they understood what they'd just witnessed. Marissa didn't follow. She was still inside, probably trying to explain to her friends how something like this could happen without her knowing. That had always been her problem. She hated surprises, unless she was the one orchestrating them. By Monday morning, Preston Tech's stock had plummeted 11%. Investors were panicking, calls went unanswered, meetings were called, damage control was being attempted before the coffee even brewed. And Logan? He vanished from social media entirely. No more golf videos, no more rooftop views from corporate towers. Just silence. The board acted swiftly. Too swiftly, if you ask me. They suspended him pending a strategic review, a polite way of saying, "We're looking for a reason to throw you out without a lawsuit." Celeste's family's PR firm spun into action, but even they couldn't rewrite what had happened. The videos were already online. The internet didn't care about their narrative. And Marissa? She waited a few days before confronting me. It was late. She arrived back at our house from her parents unannounced, standing in our living room like a stranger. No designer clothes, no jewelry, no makeup. Just a simple sweater and the same guarded look I'd seen when I first met her, before the world taught her how to pretend. "You planned this," she said, not asking, stating. "Yes." Her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes studying me like she didn't recognize the man standing before her. "You humiliated my family." "No," I said, standing up. "I exposed them. They're ruined." I took a step closer. They ruined themselves the moment they thought power only lived in their circles. The moment they laughed at a man trying to build something from nothing. The moment you stopped seeing your husband and started seeing the help. She turned away, her jaw tight. "You could have warned me." "I did," I said quietly. "You just weren't listening. You never asked who I was becoming. You were too busy polishing your own image to notice the man standing beside you." Silence hung between us like smoke. She exhaled slowly. "We can fix this." "No," I said. "You mean cover it up? There's nothing to fix. It's the truth, finally." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry. Not yet. "I supported you." I shook my head. "You supported me when it was convenient, but when your family laughed, you laughed too. When I succeeded, you were silent, and when I finally took control, you flinched." Then the tears came, quiet, full of disillusionment. She tried to say something but stopped mid-sentence. "I filed for divorce this morning," I added softly. "The papers are already with my lawyer." That broke something in her. "You're destroying everything," she spat. "No," I replied evenly. "I'm freeing myself from it." She left that night, taking only a handbag and the key I later found lying on the marble countertop. She didn't call, didn't text, and I didn't try to reach out. The next few weeks were strange, quiet. My phone rang incessantly. Reporters, investors, curious CEOs trying to understand who I really was. I declined every interview. I had nothing to prove to strangers. The only calls I answered were the ones that truly mattered. My lawyer handled the divorce discreetly. There was little to divide. The house was mine, the investments protected. She had access to a joint account, but I let it go. I didn't need her money. I needed peace. She tried once, just once, to appeal to the past. A late-night voicemail. "We used to have something before all this." I listened to it once and deleted it. Because she was right. We used to. But this wasn't that. And this wasn't now. The next morning, my assistant walked in with a newspaper. "You've gone viral," she said, a small laugh in her voice. "They're calling you the Silent Avenger." I shrugged. People love a headline. "But this one," she said, "feels different. Like justice." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Justice wasn't what I wanted. Just clarity, just honesty, just a chance to stand in a room full of people who had never truly seen me and finally let them look. And now they had. The first thing I did after the papers were signed wasn't visit my lawyer's office, or some glass-walled corporate suite, or a beachfront mansion. I drove to my mother's. She still lived in the same sun-drenched ranch house she and my father had bought in the 80s, when hope could be financed with hard work and a handshake. The lawn was overgrown, the mailbox a little crooked, but the smell of warm bread still greeted me at the door, as did the familiar creak of the floorboards near the kitchen table. When she opened the door, she said nothing. Just looked at me for a long moment, then hugged me the way only mothers can. Tight, unconditional, filled with a language no one else understands. She stepped back, her eyes scanning me. "You look tired." I nodded. "Been busy." She gestured me inside, and I followed the scent of cinnamon and old wood to the kitchen. The kettle was already on the stove, and 2 chipped mugs sat beside a plate of ginger cookies. Didn't even call ahead. "Saw the news," she said, settling into her chair, her hands folded in her lap. "You caused quite a stir." I smiled. Wasn't the plan, just the result. She poured the tea. There was no rush in her movements, no judgment in her tone. "And Marissa?" She sipped. "Gone." I chuckled. "That fast?" She raised an eyebrow. She always said too much for someone who saw so little. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at nothing. The wind rustled the leaves like the trees were whispering secrets only the old understood. "She really didn't know?" my mother asked. "No, none of them did. That's how I wanted it." For a moment, she gave me a look I knew well. "You always did like to keep your cards close. Even as a boy, you'd hide your drawings under your mattress." I watched the steam curl from my mug. It stopped being about hiding. It became about control. And now, I met her eyes. "Now it's about the truth." She leaned back in her chair and nodded. "Good. Truth makes for fewer dinner invitations, but better company." I laughed softly. Leave it to my mother to distill everything down to wisdom and cookies. She tilted her head, studying me. "So what's next? Going to build something new?" "I already have," I said. "Something different. Smaller, more personal this time. I don't want a legacy. I want clarity." A small smile touched her lips. She understood. "Legacy is just a dusty frame people use to hang their egos." "Exactly," I said. "And I'm tired of feeding people who only eat with silver spoons." We didn't talk about Marissa after that. Not because it hurt, but because there was nothing left to say. The woman who had once held my hand while we dreamed had only squeezed tighter when I started to shine brighter than she expected. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Cyrus. Logan reached out. Not as a brother-in-law, not as an enemy, but as a man with nowhere else to go. "He's lost," Cyrus wrote, "but not stupid." I stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "Give him the number. Low pay. Entry level. Let's see if humility suits him." Later that week, Logan took the offer. He showed up on Monday morning at a branch office of one of Atlas's smaller partners. No assistants, no corner office, no fanfare. He wore a shirt that was too expensive for the job and a face that was too proud for the desk he was assigned. But he showed up. No shortcuts, no connections to leverage. Cyrus sent me a picture of Logan sitting at a bare desk with a borrowed laptop and a reusable water bottle he'd been given at reception. The caption read, "Good. Let him sit there. Let him work." Let him learn that not all success has a back door. Marissa, meanwhile, had retreated back to her parents. I didn't ask for updates, but the internet never sleeps. A distant relative posted a story. No driver, no invitations, no society galas. Just her in a faded sweatshirt, alone, walking into a thrift store. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just turned off my phone. My world had grown quieter. Not empty, but deliberate. In the weeks that followed, I spent more time with my mother. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, just sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees, our rocking chairs creaking in unison, our lives finally aligning again. One afternoon, I brought her a framed photograph. It was a simple shot, me standing outside the Preston estate that day, holding the catering staff table 19 card. She looked at it, squinted, then burst out laughing. "You framed that?" she asked. "Already have." She nodded approvingly. "That's a story worth hanging." And I did. In my new office, smaller than the last, but entirely mine. The framed card sits right above my desk, not as a trophy, not as revenge, but as a reminder of who I was and who they thought I was. Catering staff, table 19. They'd written it in elegant script, gold ink on thick, rounded-edge stock. Classy, sophisticated, insulting in the way only the truly wealthy can be. Not rude, just dismissive. Thoughtful, if you considered herding cattle a form of care. I looked at that card for a long time before I framed it. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with understanding. That table was meant for the unseen, the ignored, the barely thanked for passing the salt. I'd sat at that table once, and I'd left owning the building. It's poetic, of course. The kind of line that gets turned into Instagram quotes or LinkedIn motivational posts. But it's more than just words. It's proof that real power doesn't announce itself. It waits, it observes, and when the moment is right, it doesn't strike. It simply moves, and the whole board shifts around it. I'd been told I was too quiet, too soft for business, that I didn't command enough attention, didn't own the room like Logan. He had the bluster, the booming voice, the polished smile. I had notebooks and silence, but silence is a ledger. It records everything. The day I first walked into Marissa's world, I told myself I could take it. That I could bend, compromise, adapt for the sake of love, for the sake of peace, for the long game. I'd sat through those family dinners, swallowing half-hearted barbs and full-bodied arrogance. Her father called me the young dreamer. Her mother said I had good intentions but no pedigree. Logan flicked breadcrumbs at me like I was the intern. And Marissa? She'd smile through it all, say, that's just her family, tell me not to make waves, say they'd respect me when I made something of myself. But she never understood that I already had. I just didn't need to wear it like a suit. My success didn't come with confetti. It came with quiet late nights, failed prototypes, cold pizza, and deals brokered in hoodies, not power suits. I made my choices in those shadows, strategic choices. I avoided the interviews, declined the magazine features, built my empire under different names, through shell corporations and trusted allies like Uncle Cyrus, until the architecture of Atlas Industries looked like it had sprung from nowhere. Because I was nowhere. Because I was everywhere. They hadn't bothered to look. They'd mocked what they didn't understand. And that had been their mistake. In the months since the wedding, the world had shifted for them. For me. Logan, now working an entry-level position at a firm he once dismissed as background noise, sends weekly reports without complaint. He hasn't asked for a promotion, a favor, a shortcut. Maybe it's growth. Maybe it's survival. Either way, he's learning. Marissa hasn't called. Not once. I'm not sure if it's her pride or her punishment. Maybe both. I heard through the grapevine that she tried living on her own, but eventually moved back into her parents' guest house. The same house where they once raised champagne flutes to Logan's deals and called me the one who dabbles in tech. I've moved on. I spend time with people who don't need to be impressed to offer respect. The builders, the creators, the quiet minds. I've started dabbling again, but not publicly. I meet with young entrepreneurs in the early stages. The ones eating ramen at midnight while debugging code. The ones who don't yet know how powerful they already are. I tell them the truth. You don't have to be loud to be dangerous. The name card still sits above my desk because it reminds me of what most people forget. Titles or trappings aren't power. Influence and integrity are. It's not given to you. It's taken. Quietly. Firmly. Without asking. I remember walking through the Preston estate that day, past the marble staircases and gilded mirrors. Every inch of the place screamed inherited wealth, but none of it had prepared them for someone like me. Someone with nothing to prove, but everything to reclaim. They'd wanted me to stay in the kitchen, in the background, in the overflow section. But the thing about the kitchen is, that's where the fire is. That's where the heat comes from. That's where things get made, broken down, tested, refined. While they were raising champagne toasts, I was learning to wield the flames. Now, I don't wait for permission to speak. I write the agenda. I've kept my company private. No press tours, no grand reveals, just actions. We've launched 2 new initiatives focused on education and microloans for underrepresented founders. Not as charity, but as investment. I don't want to rescue people. I want to give them the tools. And every time someone sits across from me, nervous, hopeful, dressed in something that doesn't quite fit the mold, I smile. Because I was them. Because I am them. Last week, I had dinner with my mother again. Same kitchen, same tea. She noticed the watch I was wearing and asked if it was new. Old, I said. Just finally fits. She smiled and said, "Good. Some things just need time, that's all. Time, patience, and precision." I stood in the shadows long enough for them to forget I had matches. And now they're eating at tables I own. And me? I sit wherever I damn well please.